All right, welcome to another video from Lizard Landscapes. We've got again, a tall cage. I've done one before where it was a fake tree. This is in the motif of a sandstone, taller as opposed to wider cage. So, as I said, with the fake tree, this is really for expert climbers. So you've got your tarantulas, certain types of lizards, whereby they can handle climbing up to a certain height, and they've got the super sticky feet where you don't have to worry about them falling. So got a little bit of a different piece here. I did a sandstone project a year or two ago, and it looked a little bit different. It was a wide cage as opposed to tall cage like this. Paint job was a little bit different, whereas this is a little bit more subtle. But be sure and check that one out. So made this for a 10-gallon cage that I really just turned on its end, and fitting this back into the cage here. I always make projects where I can remove the structure so as to properly sanitize the cage. But I know of a lot of other people that when they make these, they make the background a permanent part. So be sure and check out the other channels I've done, and let's get started. So you want to wear a protective mask while doing this. I usually wear that white mask, but as of late I've been wearing that much more, I guess, professional gas mask, which protects you from the dust and the fumes. So I'm doing this near an open window because I'm using a couple of hot wires from the hot wire foam factory. So these wires will enable you to cut through foam much more easily than using an ordinary knife, which I used to use years ago. So sometimes I'll do a sketch, sort of a little drawing to try to flesh out the idea. So that's what I've done here. It ended up looking a little bit like this, but changed quite a bit. So I've got a 10-gallon tank that I've just turned on its end, and had a request not too long ago from someone wanting me to do a taller rather than wide background, because all of the other backgrounds I've ever done are the more wide rather than tall. So measuring out what I believe the background to be as far as the size, using a hot wire to cut out a thinner piece of polystyrene. So all of the materials are on the materials list video page. So fitting this back into the cage and realizing that it doesn't quite fit, so I'm going to remove a little bit from one of the edges, about a 1/4 inch. So you'll really, as you go along, want to put your structure back into the cage, make sure it fits, and that it's got a little bit of play. So really, ideally, you want it to be a little bit smaller by about a 1/4 inch. And you really only know this once you've put it back into the cage, because it's a little bit difficult to measure that. So tracing around this piece, because I'm creating another project at the exact same time, which will go on this cage, and then tracing around a much thicker piece of polystyrene there. So I've got a couple of pieces here that I'm going to glue together. So it doesn't take much glue, just a little bit, just enough to be able to hold the two pieces together, because I'll wind up covering it in a mortar later on in the video. So I've got those two glued together. I'm going to try to bevel these edges a little bit. And this is done in part to be able to fit the structure back into the cage. So I've got that beveled, a little bit, and this will help me be able to fit it back into that cage. Make sure I can fit that back in, and occasionally, as I said before, try to make sure you've got some play to it and that it's easy to fit that back in. So I'm going to take another scrap piece and cut that to where it's essentially the same size and shape, just covering the lower portion of the project. So we're going to glue that into place. This is really so that there can be a significant hide in that lower portion. So I'm going to, using one of those hot wires from the hot wire foam factory, going to start cutting out what will end up being the beginning of that base to the hide. So during this process, I've printed out, or at least have on my computer, some reference photos, and you can go to a site like morguefile.com, which will allow you to use photos as a reference for essentially anything artistic. So cutting out more of what that base hide will be. So I've got this piece here that's going to kind of extend. I've beveled one edge of it, and going to glue that into place. And I've kind of drawn out a little bit more of how I want that kind of separation between those two towers of sandstone to look. So beveling one of the edges to try to get it or give it more of a realistic look instead of that sharp edge. So did that with the other side as well. And just taking the hot wire, the flexible hot wire, and trying to flesh out some of the structure as far as the shape. And this was really quite a fun project using the hot wire, because you can really, with twisting and kind of moving it up and down as I'm doing here, create some very realistic sandstone, wind swept looking surface. And like I say, just using those reference photos, looking back and forth and trying to come up with something original. I mean, it vaguely resembles some of the photos I was looking at, but I really want to try to make it your own, and in this case, give it the suggestion of a sandstone look. So there's how it's looking so far. Kind of got it all carved out there. So you can see the hide looking quite cavernous in there, making sure I can fit this back into the cage so that it's got at least like a 1/4 inch play. You can see the other project there, which is a fake tree, so check that out. But doing these two projects at the same time, so it's the foam coat stage or mortar, and this is essentially a strengthening agent. So I'm mixing this together. Got this as well from the hot wire foam factory, although in the past I have used non-sanded grout for several projects. But just following the directions, using 3 parts powder to 1 part water, and I end up using a little bit more water than what their directions suggest. So if you're creating this for a living creature, I say that because you could be creating this just for a random terrarium, but if it's for a living creature, you really want to make sure that you get 2 coats of this strengthening agent called foam coat, or you can use grout, on here to ensure that it's a strong project. So I'm applying a good layer of it here, and I'm going to try to get to the problem areas first. So I'm going to try to get inside and really cover all of that inside the hide. So I'm trying to cover that hide because it's going to be really difficult once this gets to be like halfway covered with this foam coat. It's going to be dramatically heavier than it is when you first start. So it's good to get those problem areas done first, and then with the other outside areas, you can prop it up, and it's a lot easier if you get to these difficult areas first. So here what I'm doing is everything's covered, and I'm kind of brushing on a wet coat of foam coat. So same mixture, it's just I'm really using the bristles of the brush to enhance the look of the sandstone, trying to create those layers. So using the texture that the bristles of the brush would create in conjunction with the mortar to try to create more of a texture. So here is the painting stage. You got a water bottle, got some orange acrylic paint, and a little bit too much water, which is how you want to start out. And when you do this, you can really get into some interesting looks because of the water, because it's a little bit transparent, because certain areas will get sprayed maybe 7 times, other areas maybe 2. So when it dries, you've got this really different look, as opposed to if you were to just use a brush and brush on like a really flat layer. So I ended up putting 2 layers with the water bottle method of covering all of the surface. And really you could at this point say that it's done as far as the paint job. I of course went back into it and put in some banding and different detail here and there. But if you're not wanting to put that much time into it, you really could, with the water bottle technique, just use that as your method of painting and then move on to the ceiling stage. So here's a way of creating some varying color sections where I've got some really dark orange, kind of a burnt red, and putting a layer on, and then taking a really clean wet brush and kind of trying to mask those edges that really dark layer of paint created. So I've got another area here where I'm applying a really dark band of, in this case, dark orange. And then later I will, immediately, because I'm using acrylic and it'll dry really quick, immediately I will take a clean, really wet brush, just using water, and trying to blend those edges, just trying to create more of a realistic look, or at least a different type of look, because I realize with sandstone there can be certain variations in the color where you've got really sharp edges, and you'll see me do that later. But here's just one if you wanted to have the entire, I guess, theme or motif of this sandstone be this particular style. This is a really interesting look where you've got this blending of sorts after you apply that band of paint, and then going over it with a clean wet brush. So mixing together some really light orange. So this was a whole bunch of white acrylic, and added just a little bit of orange to it, and decided to put in some really bright banding, just as kind of like a design choice, just to make some of those sections really pop. You can really see on the right there with that dark red band that's looking more and more like a realistic color variance that you would see in real sandstone. But trying to blend, this didn't quite work as well with the really lighter orange as it did with the burnt red that's a little bit more close to the orange color. So I ended up changing this up a little bit, using more of a harsher edge to some of this lighter banding. And then taking a much larger brush and just going in and possibly creating a much bigger band of that lighter color to the sandstone. You can also use, or try to use, the dry brush technique, where you load your brush full of the color and then remove most of the paint on a paper towel or rag, and then go back in, and it really kind of blends the two colors, the color that's already there and the color you've got, the remnants of the color you've got on the brush. So this, I don't know if this worked too well, but just to show you different techniques, I'm going to mix together quite a bit of bright orange and a little bit of burnt red to a different color that I'm going to try to dry brush this over quite a few sections just to give it more of an orange look. It was looking a little bit more pink before I did this. So sometimes with that water bottle technique, although you can really get into some interesting looks here, as you can see, because some of the paint is kind of peeled off and it's really started to look like worn rock. So here, getting into, as I mentioned earlier, more of a harder edge to, if you look at some pictures of sandstone, they will have more of a harder edge to the layers of going in between the more of an orange look and then more of what looks kind of beige, but really is more of like a light orange, and then getting into like a very dark orange, almost burnt red type look that I'm doing right there. So it's one of those artistic decisions you've got to make. Here is more of like a half wet brush technique where you can really see the underlayer of that more traditional orange, and then putting this darker layer of a darker orange on top of it, but I'm not covering up everything underneath. So several different techniques to try to pursue. Bounce is another product from the hot wire foam factory where you can, if you're like me, you're clumsy and you need something to make these projects more impact resistant, and Bounce can certainly help you with that. It's something you want to apply before the sealant. So here is the sealant stage. You can see the other project there on the left, but sealing both of these with a water resistant non-toxic sealant. And really what you want to do is apply a layer and then wait 72 hours for it to cure, and then repeat the process 4 times. So this is if you've got a living creature and you really need to make sure you've got everything covered and everything is sealed up and you've got those layers drying for the appropriate amount of time. The other thing you want to do is try to reseal it like every 2 years. Another thing you can do to counteract the shininess and to build up the basking spot is maybe wherever you think the hot spot is, if you've got such a cage as that, apply a layer of sealant and then sprinkle fine grained colored sand on it, and then repeat that process. So you've got a layer of sealant and a layer of sand, and just over and over again build that up so that it's more impervious to heat and wear and tear. So here, just sprinkling colored non-toxic sand. Again, you can find this in the materials list video, but sprinkling that on, you can create variations with different colors of sand, blending orange and red and beige or white. So there you have it, a sandstone motif project for a taller as opposed to wider cage, again meant for more of your expert climbers. So be sure and check out the second channel and the third channel. Second channel where I'm teaching people how to draw, whereby the first video I do a self-portrait, and the third channel, which is a Christian channel. So thank you for watching.